Imagine if Housemarque had created Rez, and you'll have a pretty good sense of what Futuridium Extended Play Deluxe is all about. Launching as limited run's fourth release just a few weeks after Oddworld New and Tasty, Futuridium EP made for a startling contrast against Abe's updated Odyssey, where Oddworld presented players with a moody, shadow-drenched world built from fantastic yet realistically rendered environments and characters. Futuridium is a pop-rock explosion of color and light, and unlike Oddworld's meticulous precision platforming, the pace of Futuridium never slows down to allow players to soak in the atmosphere. On the contrary, the game constantly leaves you with the sensation that you're not going nearly fast enough. Ultimately, Futuridium has exactly one thing in common with the Oddworld. At heart, they're both puzzle games. It's just that Oddworld is a puzzle game about navigating deadly traps and evading murderous foes through careful planning and panicked execution. Futuridium, on the other hand, is about blasting bright, glowy balls as quickly and efficiently as possible. Developed by a small Italian studio called Mixed Bag, Futuridium harkens back to classic arcade games. It's almost, but not quite, a rail shooter along the lines of Nintendo's Star Fox or Sega's Panzer Dragoon. The difference being that you can veer from your designated course. You just don't really want to. Futuridium has a simple premise: to complete a stage as quickly as possible. And it's the kind of game that discourages exploration and dawdling in favor of plotting out the fastest, most efficient way to hit your objectives, and then developing reflexes sharp enough to pull off your schemes. Each stage of Futuridium has the same basic goal. You need to shoot down all the blue spheres in each stage, then destroy the stage core that becomes visible once the spheres are taken out. It's straightforward enough, but the game throws in a few complications as you advance, such as orbs that remain hidden until your ship passes through an object that reveals their location. Futuridium provides you with a limited set of tools for taking on each of its 50 stages. You can steer, shoot, accelerate with a quick burst of speed, and reverse directions with a dizzying, instant 180-degree turn. The complexity you'll find here emerges not from the controls, but rather from the design and layout of the stages, which grow in sophistication the further you advance into the game. Futuridium seems pretty basic at first glance, with long, rail-like structures lined with straightforward arrangements of targets, but the designs quickly blossom into challenging 3D puzzles that must be solved entirely with the tools you have on hand. That is, banking, shooting, and reversing. The hyper-stylized visuals factor into the difficulty level. Futuridium has no interest in realism or trompe-l'oeil depictions of three-dimensional space. It's all about neon-drenched objects dotting the ramps and passages of bone-white structures suspended in the inky blackness of space. The lack of shading and shadows gives Futuridium a dazzling sci-fi look, but it also plays havoc with the eye's ability to perceive spatial depth and the relative locations of objects to your ship. You have to train yourself to see how objects relate to one another in Futuridium, because operating on instinct alone will only lead to disaster. You'll steer into walls and targets that are actually much closer to your ship than they appear to be, or hit the reverse button a little too quickly as you bank and smash into a wall. A collision in Futuridium isn't necessarily the end of the game, but it's always a significant setback. Your ship has a limited amount of energy with which to finish a stage, and smashing into something doesn't simply deduct a steep energy penalty, it also sends you back to the start of the level, meaning you'll end up burning more energy, flying back to the point at which you died. Disaster becomes even harder to avoid once the structures begin activating point defenses like beam cannons and homing missiles, and targets begin to disappear behind moving walls. You only have a single life in which to complete the game, with permanent checkpoints activating every 10 stages, so there's not a lot of room for failure, at least not at first. However, this is called Futuridium Extended Play, and that's not just a reference to the way the music and retrofuturistic visuals evoke vinyl-based synthesizer music of the 70s. The longer you play, the more chances you unlock for additional, extended play. Each blue sphere you destroy as you play through the stages is added to a cumulative running target total. As you reach specific milestones, you open up new features for the game. Sometimes these are simply cosmetic perks, such as skins, but you also unlock credits. Play long enough and eventually you'll unlock 10 credits per play, enough for even the clumsiest shooter novice to brute force their way through the game. Of course, with as much playtime as it takes to unlock that virtual pocket of quarters, you're likely to get a good enough handle on the quirks and mechanics of Futuridium that you don't really need the additional help. After a while, the challenge of Futuridium is less about completing stages than about completing them as quickly as possible. You're graded and given medals for your performance in each stage according to 3 factors, including speed, and unlocking every medal in Futuridium is a true savant-level gaming task. Speaking of the game's title, Futuridium also speaks to the creator's intentions. Its design was inspired by a European microcomputer classic called Iridium. While Iridium never showed up in the US on PCs, console collectors may know it by its localized title, The Last Starfighter for NES. Futuridium takes the basic design of Iridium, in which players had to navigate over space fortresses, taking out gun emplacements with each pass, and tweaks it with a low-poly, behind-the-ship viewpoint of Nintendo Star Fox, creating something at once steeped in history, yet fresh and inventive. It's an interesting, artful take on the classic rail shooter, blending together both modern and retro aesthetics with classic game design principles to create what feels like nothing so much as an obscure, cult classic PlayStation 1 rail shooter that someone dug up and remastered with high-definition visuals. Of course, this isn't a PS1 game, it's a PS4 game, and a PS Vita game, and Limited Run released both versions on physical media as the company's 6th and 7th titles. The dizzying retrofuturism of Futuridium was followed up soon after with an entirely different form of retro action set in a futuristic world. Renegade Kid's platform action game Xeodrifter belongs to a category of indie gaming that's proven to be even more popular and more prolific than the shoot-'em-up, the Metroidvania. Metroidvania adventures would grow to become a staple of Limited Run's publishing lineup, and Xeodrifter made a perfect way to dip a toe into the genre. It's a compact, bite-sized interpretation of the format, one that can easily be completed in the space of 2 or 3 hours. Well, somewhat easily. Xeodrifter isn't as expansive as many other exploratory platform action games, but it isn't shy about stomping the player and their self-esteem into tiny pieces. With Xeodrifter, Renegade Kid undertook an exercise in minimalism. The entire game plays out almost wordlessly, with no real player guidance outside of a space map where 4 planets are designated according to numbers. These numbers vaguely hint at the order in which you should tackle them, but this being a Metroidvania, there's plenty of backtracking. In fact, the final showdown takes place on Planet 3, not Planet 4. You can travel to any of the 4 planets at any time, though the more advanced worlds contain both physical barriers that block your progress and classic space monster meat wall in the form of powerful creatures that can take out a neophyte drifter in a single hit or two. Your ultimate objective in Xeodrifter is to find and reclaim a warp core for your damaged starship, allowing you to depart the small planetary system you've become trapped in. The core is held by a creature, or is it a succession of creatures, that dwells in various key points around the maps. There's basically only one boss in Xeodrifter, and you fight it over and over again, and with each encounter it gains new powers. But that's fair because each time you defeat the boss, you also gain a new power. This being a Metroidvania game, the powers you collect expand your ability to navigate the world. Some of them double as weapons, such as the solar burst charge shot that can vaporize most foes and break the boss's otherwise indestructible shield. But really, your skill enhancements are centered around exploration and discovery. You can dive into water with a mini-sub, dash so fast you can run along the surface of magma or acid, streak up tall shafts with a rocket jump, and taking a page from Renegade Kid's hit, Mutant Muds, zap instantly into the background of the world to bypass barriers in the foreground. Your drifter's combat capabilities are primarily enhanced through collectibles that become accessible as a side effect of the exploratory skills you acquire. There are no suit or armor upgrades, merely health boosters. And though you never find any kind of weapon to replace your basic blaster, the gun upgrades you can find hidden in secret passages throughout the 4 planets allow you to augment and customize your default pistol however you like. Each upgrade converts into a skill point that can be assigned to one of several weapon upgrade categories: strength, rate, waveform, and spread. And you can swap the allocation of these upgrades at any time to best suit a given situation. For example, you may want to emphasize the size of the wave beam ripple, or the spread of your beam while exploring in order to take out fast-moving foes with minimal risk. While facing a boss typically means you'll want to pour as much upgrade juice into sheer stopping power as you possibly can. The boss monster is capable of making use of some nasty tricks that can result in long, drawn-out fights if you're not smart about using all the tools you accumulate by defeating its weaker forms. For example, it loves to duck into the background layer and refill its health. The first time you encounter the boss, you can't counter this ability. But once you earn the power to enter the background yourself, you'll be able to jump back and punish your foe while it guzzles energy. However, the constant push-pull of boss evolution means that the bad guy is always a step or two ahead of you. Once you learn to zap into the background, for example, the boss will flood the foreground with magma and drop boulders into the background while hovering safely out of reach. You're always on the defensive here, and the boss offers no quarter. Though Xeodrifter does offer a small kindness in that it sets up a checkpoint at the start of each boss battle, so you don't need to fight your way back to the showdown when you inevitably die. There's not really a lot to Xeodrifter, but between the steady evolution of the boss encounters and the way your own skill growth encourages you to seek out opportunities to open new paths and find hidden skill boosts in territories you've already conquered, it definitely makes the most of its compact size and efficient design. Xeodrifter captures the sense of mystery and isolation that made the old Metroid games so evocative. There are no waypoints or guide arrows to lead you to your next destination, nor does anyone ever bother to explain the plot, how the alien boss acquired all these powers in the first place, or why the tokens you earn from your boss victories can open the strange gate in World 3. It's just you, powerful alien monsters, and a highly adaptable gun against a silent retro gaming realm. Xeodrifter originated as a 3DS game, but it quickly made its way to many other platforms. Limited Run Games specifically brought the PS4 and Vita versions to physical media as releases number 8 and 9. Though this would be only the first of several collaborations between Limited Run and Renegade Kid, as well as Renegade Kid's current incarnation, a TUI. In fact, the next collaboration will be a TUI Collection, an anthology release that offers players a physical version of Xeodrifter, Mutant Mudds, and several other titles for Nintendo 3DS at last, bringing everything full circle. Tomorrow, as a matter of fact. Don't miss it.